If you've ever tried to walk away from a toxic relationship and felt like you were losing more than just a person, this video is for you. Because for many people, letting go doesn't feel like freedom at first, and it feels like confusion, like emptiness, like part of your identity disappeared overnight. And that experience is far more common than most people realize. When people imagine leaving a toxic relationship, they usually imagine relief. They imagine clarity, peace, a sense of strength returning. But what actually happens for many people is much quieter and much more unsettling. They leave, and instead of feeling better, they feel disoriented. They wake up unsure of who they are without the constant emotional noise. They feel restless in the quiet. They miss someone they know hurt them, and that contradiction creates shame. People start asking themselves questions like, why do I feel worse now that it's over? Why do I miss someone who treated me badly? Why does this feel like a loss of myself? And the moment those questions turn inward, the self-judgment starts. But here's the truth most people never hear. Letting go of a toxic relationship doesn't just remove a person, it removes a role you've been living inside. And when a role disappears, identity shakes. Toxic dynamics don't just shape how you relate to someone else, they shape how you relate to yourself. They organize your attention, your emotions, your sense of purpose. And when that structure collapses, your nervous system doesn't immediately feel free. It feels unmoored. Many people underestimate how much of their daily life was structured around the relationship. Not just time, but mental space, checking messages, anticipating moods, replaying conversations, trying to fix what felt unstable. That constant orientation towards someone else becomes a psychological anchor. And when it's gone, the mind doesn't know where to rest. This is why letting go can feel like losing yourself, because parts of your identity were built inside the dynamic, not outside of it. In toxic relationships, people often become very good at adapting. They learn how to read subtle changes. They learn when to speak and when to stay quiet. They learn how to regulate someone else's emotions. And over time, that adaptability becomes self-definition. I'm the understanding one. I'm the patient one. I'm the one who holds things together. These roles don't feel optional, they feel necessary. They feel like who you are. So when the relationship ends, it's not just a breakup, it's a collapse of function. Who are you when there's nothing to manage, nothing to anticipate, nothing to fix? This is where many people panic and return. Not because the relationship was healthy, but because familiar roles feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. The nervous system doesn't measure health the way the mind does, it measures predictability. And toxic dynamics, as painful as they are often highly predictable. You know the rhythm, you know the pattern, you know how to survive inside it. Healthy space, by contrast, feels undefined, quiet, unstructured, open. And openness can feel terrifying when your body learns safety through vigilance. This is why people often describe early healing as feeling numb or empty. They think something is wrong. But what's actually happening is withdrawal from emotional intensity. Toxic relationships create cycles of stress and relief. Stress heightens emotion, relief feels rewarding, and the nervous system becomes conditioned to that loop. When the loop ends, the body doesn't immediately feel calm. It feels deprived. This is not because you miss the pain, it's because your system hasn't yet learned how to generate meaning without it. Another reason letting go feels like losing yourself is because toxic relationships often narrow identity. They reduce your focus. Your world slowly becomes smaller, centered on the relationship, centered on the emotional weather of another person. Friends fade, interests quiet down, personal goals get postponed, not all at once, gradually, quietly. So when the relationship ends, there's suddenly space, and space feels overwhelming when you haven't inhabited it in a long time. This is why people often rush to fill it. They rebound, they obsess, they replay, they distract. Anything to avoid sitting with the unfamiliar silence. But that silence is not emptiness, it's unclaimed identity. Healing doesn't immediately feel like becoming stronger. It feels like becoming undefined. And that's one of the hardest transitions for the human psyche. There's also grief here that people don't talk about. Not just grief for the person, but grief for the version of yourself that existed inside the relationship. The one who tried harder, the one who hoped longer, the one who believed things would change. Letting go means accepting that version of you doesn't get to keep living, and that hurts. Another layer of loss comes from meaning. Toxic relationships often feel meaningful because they feel intense. There's urgency, emotion, story. And when that disappears, life can feel strangely flat. People worry, was that the most I'll ever feel? Will anything ever matter that much again? But intensity is not the same as depth. and chaos is not the same as connection. Depth grows slowly. It doesn't spike the nervous system, it settles it. And that settling can feel boring or empty at first because it's unfamiliar. This is why many people return to toxic dynamics, even after insight. They understand the pattern intellectually, but emotionally they feel lost without it. Insight alone doesn't rebuild identity. Experience does. Healing requires learning who you are without emotional survival, without constant monitoring, without earning closeness, without bracing for instability. That learning period feels awkward, unimpressive, quiet, and because it lacks drama, people assume it's wrong. But this phase is where real change happens, not in big realizations, but in small tolerances. Tolerating calm, tolerating not knowing what comes next, tolerating relationships that don't require effort to sustain. Many people mistake this tolerance for lack of passion, but what's actually happening is nervous system recalibration. The body is learning a new baseline, a baseline where connection doesn't come with threat, where closeness doesn't require vigilance, where love doesn't need to be earned through endurance. This learning takes time, and during that time, you may feel like you don't recognize yourself. That doesn't mean you're losing yourself. It means you're meeting parts of yourself that never had space before. Identity formed in survival is narrow. Identity formed in safety is spacious. Another reason letting go feels destabilizing is because toxic relationships often override internal signals. You stop trusting your instincts. You second guess your perceptions. You rely more on the other person's reactions than your own inner sense. When the relationship ends, you're left with a question. How do I know what I feel without someone else telling me? That uncertainty feels like loss, but it's actually the beginning of self-trust. Self-trust doesn't arrive fully formed. It grows through small decisions, through choosing rest instead of chaos, through honoring discomfort without immediately escaping it. This is also why people sometimes say healing feels lonely, because they're no longer emotionally fused with someone else's experience. They're standing on their own nervous system for the first time. Loneliness in this phase doesn't always mean lack of connection. It often means lack of distraction. Without the constant emotional pull of a toxic dynamic, internal experiences become louder. Thoughts surface, feelings rise, old grief appears. This isn't regression, it's integration. And integration is slow, quiet, uncelebrated. One of the most important shifts is realizing that missing someone doesn't mean you should go back. Missing is not a directive. It's a signal that your nervous system is adjusting to absence. You can miss someone and still choose not to return. You can feel longing and still protect yourself. Those things are not contradictions. As identity stabilizes outside of toxicity, something interesting happens. The pull weakens, not because you forced it away, but because your system found something else to orient toward. Peace stops feeling empty, consistency stops feeling boring, and unpredictability starts to feel exhausting instead of exciting. This is the moment people realize, I didn't lose myself. I was living in a version of myself shaped by survival. Letting go doesn't erase who you were. It reveals who you didn't get to be. This transition isn't linear. There will be days you feel grounded and days you feel tempted. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means your nervous system is learning in layers. Each time you stay with discomfort, instead of running back to familiarity, you build tolerance. Each time you choose steadiness over intensity, you reinforce safety. Each time you let boredom exist without panicking, you create space for depth. This is how identity reorganizes, not through force, but through repetition. You are not behind. You are not weak. You are not broken for finding this hard. Letting go of toxic dynamics feels like losing yourself because parts of you were built to survive them. And survival identities don't dissolve quietly, but what replaces them is not emptiness. It's autonomy, presence, choice, and eventually something shifts. You stop needing chaos to feel alive. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. You stop mistaking intensity for love. Not because someone told you to, but because your body learned another way. If this video resonated, if it describes something you're living through, take that as information, not judgment. Your experience makes sense, and you don't need to rush through it. Healing is not about becoming someone new, it's about returning to yourself without the noise. And when you're ready, calm won't feel like loss. It will feel like home. If this kind of understanding is something you want more of, subscribing helps this channel grow and reach people who need it. Psychology explained through identity, not judgment. Stay curious, stay patient, stay tapped.